Okay, so this video is going to explain the microteaching assessment task, which has a focus on formative assessment in the form of developing a SAC. So you are going to work individually to create an assessment task, a SAC, that demonstrates an approach to achieving engaged and authentic learning for VCE learners. The SAC should link to the outcome that you've planned for in the unit assessment task. So if you've chosen Unit 3, Outcome 1, then the SAC should incorporate the key knowledge and skill from that particular outcome. So for this task, you are required to complete a 10-minute peer teaching presentation. So you may have done some microteaching in the past where you've created an activity and you've taught the activity to your peers as if they were students. This is slightly different in that you aren't teaching the activity, because you can't really teach a SAC, can you? You'll be outlining the rationale behind why you created the SAC. So why is this SAC engaging, for an example? How does it address the outcomes? What was the rationale behind choosing that particular task? What key knowledge and key skills does it incorporate? Does it incorporate all of them or part of the outcome? Okay, so basically you're introducing the idea as if these were your colleagues and they were, teaching your SAC, I suppose. So at the presentation, you would distribute your created SAC task, as well as produce a handout, which is basically giving an overview of your SAC, the curriculum links, the pedagogy links, and an explanation of the student preparation and things like that. After your presentation and after the feedback from your peers, you will do a praxis of inquiry to reflect on your teaching practice and your experience throughout creating the SAC. So let's look at the presentation and the creation of the SAC first. You need to outline the rationale for why you chose the design, the SAC design. You need to explain what the SAC is, what the students need to do, how the classroom's set up, what preparation that the students have undertaken, things like that. Where the SAC fits within the overall unit, and what important preparation or experiences the students have undertaken prior. Discussion how the SAC informs you formatively about student learning, especially in preparation for the exam, and any further information that will inform your peers about the nature of the SAC. So all that information is going to be on the microteaching template, which is provided on VUC. So include the activity title, obviously the SAC, where you, if you have, source the activity, include the exact the exact reference here. Your name, what curriculum focus it is, what year level. Now this is the key knowledge and skill descriptors that will be assessed in your SAC, so just copy and paste straight from the study design. Here you need to think about, okay, so what does the study design and advice for teachers and anything else that you can think of, for an example, the examiner's report, what advice do they provide in relation to assessing their outcome? So they might give you some tips and tricks, they might give you some formats that they would like you to use over other formats. This is the section that you need to show that you've really researched the information out there in terms of the advice given. At the completion of this microteaching session, my colleagues should, what are the experiences here? Here you need to give an overview of the activity. So here we're talking about the SAC. So what are students going to do? How are they going to do it? What preparation do they need, etc.? Like I've discussed before, that goes in here. I should be able to read this document and be able to take it and teach the SAC or prepare my students in the same way that you have. Here you need to connect your pedagogy of your chosen SAC to HITS and the E5s. So thinking about, well, there is some engagement in a SAC, and there's probably more engagement in, other SACs like something that you've got to create, or, a media analysis compared to just a written multiple choice and short answer test. Okay, so here you've got to think about the rationale according to evidence. And the last one is references, and make sure you put where it fits in with your unit. So heading back to the criteria, when you choose a SAC, you need to be considering all the advice given to you by the VCAA, and you will find a lot of it in, as I've said before, the advice for teachers and the study design. What's really important to consider, if I'm looking here, we've got health and human development study design, we've got unit 3. If we scroll down and have a look at the assessments of the levels of achievement, okay, the SAC assessment, there is a table here that addresses the outcome. So if my unit was on outcome 1, I've got 50 marks allocated. These are the assessment tasks in health and human development that I'm allowed to do to assess this outcome. Now, this is going to be different for each specialisation, and this really needs to be considered. If I'm looking at English, for an example, so this is English Unit 3, and I scroll down, I've got a similar table. If I was addressing the outcome 1, I've got an outcome that's been split, and there are a number of specialisations that have marks allocated in a split way like this one. So for this task, you wouldn't create both, okay, even though it's saying and, okay, you would just create one of those SACs, whichever one you want to create. But you would mention in your template that this outcome has been split into, well, in this case, it's half. It's not always half. Okay, so we don't want to create a SAC for addressing the outcome entirely, necessarily. Okay, in this case, we're allowed to split it up, and there are multiple cases of various specializations that do that. Okay. So heading back to the assessment task, after you've presented to your peers, you've explained the pedagogy behind your chosen created SAC, you've got some peer feedback, okay? You need to write a praxis inquiry reflection. So under the headings of practice described, explained, theorised and changed, you need to reflect on your teaching practices. So described. Provide a statement of intention of your lesson. Include the philosophy on being a specialist educator, your pedagogic approaches, teaching and learning strategies, etc. This will not be in great detail because you've already discussed that in the template. So within the template, you've already discussed this here and in this section. Okay, so explained is discussing how well you achieved your outcomes in your philosophy, what feedback your peers gave you, what do you know now that you didn't know before throughout this experience. Practice theorised is connecting your reflections to the E5s and HITs and how well did your ideas connect to your philosophy on teaching and pedagogy. So theorised here and described are going to be the two least ones because you've already discussed them in the template. Practice changed is going to be probably the most. Okay, so thinking about the most discussed rather. So thinking about your strengths and weaknesses and areas for improvement in light of what you theorised, in light of what you thought would happen. Consider your strengths and weaknesses. What improvements could be made to the SAC? You could reference the unit that you have created. You can reference your thoughts to assessment 1 to substantiate your thinking. You can think about the course material that we've covered so far in this unit and how you can link your ideas, your strengths and weaknesses to that. You can think about AITSL standards. This is really important in the profession, thinking about how you can continually improve. It's that lifelong learning aspect. Okay, so explained and changed will be the two most detailed.